Hello, I'm Don Mooers, and welcome to Montgomery Weekend Review. There'll be a symposium on the First Amendment, the National Press Club, led by our first guest, Brian Karem, who's the executive editor of the Sentinel News Service. He's here to tell us all about it and why it's important to us here in Montgomery County. Well, the questions about the relationship between law enforcement and communities across the country. We've really seen it from Baltimore City. Montgomery County residents need to have answers to their concerns. John McCarthy, we're so lucky to have John McCarthy, state's attorney, who's here to provide some of his impressions of possible problems and solutions here in Montgomery County. CCI, Community Clinics Incorporated, is in the process of changing its name to better show the services, fit the services it's delivering to thousands of people throughout Montgomery County and Prince George's County. José Lius Diaz has the details. Montgomery County Public Schools has an active organization that represents its administrators and principals and works to aid public schools in educating our precious children. James Koutsos is the president of the organization. He's here to introduce us to the organization, tell us all about it. Brian, welcome back.
Thanks, Don. Good to see you.
So, First Amendment, what an exciting thing. You've got a little special story about this, don't you?
Well, it's a First Amendment symposium. All the living members of the press who've actually gone to jail to protect the First Amendment for the first time, historic occasion, we're all getting together for the very first time at the National Press Club.
Why are you involved?
Because I went to jail 4 times.
Whoa.
Well, state's attorney should ask that question.
You know, this is a diverse group. I guess I was unaware we had a jailbird.
Yep. I had a confidential source in a murder case in San Antonio, Texas in 1989. Went to court 4 times. Each time, the first time the judge that threw me in jail didn't have jurisdiction over the case, so he wasn't really he was just the intake judge. He liked me so much, he threw me in jail. And then the second 2 and 3 times, it went all the way up to a federal magistrate and then ended up at the Supreme Court. Well, the funny part of that was sitting in the witness stand, and I had interviewed a guy who confessed that he had killed a police officer but said that there was something wrong and it was self-defense. Nobody believed him because he was Hispanic youth on the wrong side of town at the wrong time of day. Turns out the cop had been speedballing. When the autopsy came back, he had cocaine and marijuana and heroin in his system. And so maybe he was telling the truth. So I was sitting there on the witness stand, and I said to the ACLU attorney, who told me, he said, "I've heard every man's testimony should be heard." And the judge said, "You know, that sounds kind of funny coming from an ACLU attorney." He goes, "It's stuck in my throat, but I'm going to stay with it." And I said, "Well, wait a minute. You have greater access to your client than I do. Why don't you ask him who helped me put together the interview?" And he goes, "You don't get to ask the questions here." And the judge said, "Normally I'd say that, but that's a damn good question. Why don't you answer it?" So 4 times they sent me to jail, and I never did give up the source. The source feared there were 3 people that made the interview possible. She moved away to California and then came forward.
What's occurred that's brought us together for this Monday?
The biggest problem is I'm not going to be an apologist for reporters. I feel we have a lot to answer for. We cover Justin Bieber and the Kardashians way too much, and we don't do what we should do. But at the same time, in government, I have run across, and present company excluded, you all are great with information, but there are many different government jurisdictions that don't provide information. They speak about transparency, and they are really about opacity. And it's very frustrating. You can't sit there and criticize me for not covering something when you don't provide the information to me that should be provided.
Is it worse now than before?
It's worse than it's ever been. In fact, I'm no fan of Ronald Reagan's, but the first White House I ever covered was Ronald Reagan's White House. They were more cooperative than the current White House, and I'm a fan of many things that this White House has done.
Why do you think we've fallen into the trap of not focusing on hard journalism, hard stories? Why have we fallen in this pop culture fascination?
Because many times reporters are incapable of providing us with the information that we need or telling us the story in a manner that tells us why we need to know it. The best journalism I saw recently was by a comedian, John Oliver, who interviewed Andrew Snowden. And he's trying to tell us about all the information and how the NSA got information that you shouldn't have. And he related it to sexually explicit photographs, and people are going, "Hey man, I didn't know NSA had pictures of my, Right. And so it put it in terms that people could understand.
Right.
That's what we don't do very well as journalists. But it's hard to do it if we don't have the information provided to us. And then we become very shallow, so we cover press releases and surface things, and the things that really affect us, we have been recalcitrant in covering, and we need to get better.
Do you find irony? Watching this last couple of weeks, we've had the U.S. has been in negotiations with Cuba about opening embassies, and one of the sticky points the Cubans are holding back is the U.S. insistence on supporting free journalism that's going to expose and all that in Cuba.
I find it hilarious when we don't practice it here. Yeah. I mean, you're asking them to be open. How about, I honestly, I have never worked with a word. The worst are the WMATA. Absolutely horrible. After the fire that killed someone, we called up WMATA and said, listen, we need just a copy of your procedures so we can help people get off the train. We can't provide them to you. What do you mean you can't? Part of them are on your website. It's under investigation by the NTSB. I go, you won't help me help people get off the train safely if something happens. They go, well, what if you use the information personally? I go, look, this is public information. You don't get to ask why we want it. It's to be provided to the public. Provide it. Besides, yeah, we will use it personally. We want to get off safely.
Oh boy.
So it's a big problem. It's a huge problem.
About a minute. Tell us more about what's going to happen at the press club, because I think a lot of people are going to want to be down there.
Monday, 6 p.m. 12 members of the press who've gone to jail in support of the freedom of the press will be together. We're going to lobby for greater transparency in government and a national shield law so reporters can obtain information and do the reporting that we should do. A historic occasion in the fact that it's a small group, small family of people who've actually done it. It's always romanticized on TV, and we're the ones who've actually gone through it. And we're going to be together for the very first time. And I consider them family members. They've all, and I will say this, there were two things that I found in common with every one of them. One is the people who put them in jail said, we believe in the First Amendment, not in your case, but otherwise. And that was something that we all had in common. And secondly, that we all had in common is they were all upset with the way they were treated by their brethren in the press who told them that they just went to jail to further their own cause, their own career.
Interesting.
Needs to be a little bit more sobriety in the press.
Well, Brian, we're pleased that you come and share your part of your career with us when
Pleasure.
you're here with us.
I'm not going back to jail for you, and I'll never wear orange again, but that's another story.
The new black.
John McCarthy,
Not for me.
State's Attorney, welcome back.
Thanks, Don. It's great to be here.
As we go into this, we're going to be talking about the relationship with State's Attorney and police and the community. Maybe start off just throughout to you. What lessons are there coming from Baltimore City and some of these other places for us here in Montgomery
it's interesting.
County?
I'm going to seize on the word transparency. I think a lot of what we do in the criminal justice arena needs to become more transparent to the community. Look, I think it's a national tragedy that that people of color who come into the criminal justice system, we know statistically about 1 out of 3 people of color come in, have any faith that they're going to receive justice in the system. And that's just a disgrace. We are in the process of doing a number of things here in Montgomery County. On Monday next week, we're going to announce the first of its kind agreement that I've made with Howard County.
Wait, Brian, for the Sentinel, take some notes here.
Yeah.
We're already there.
Brian already said he was coming.
Yeah, but we'll be there.
There was a report that came out that a lot of people might have missed, but it was President Obama put together a presidential panel which addressed the issue of policing in the 21st century.
Okay.
There are 2 primary lessons or two recommendations to people in the nation. Number 1 is if you have a police-involved death or in custody death, independently have that case prosecuted. Don't have prosecutors from the same jurisdiction handle that case. Also, independently, don't have police agencies that have those same officers that are involved in that particular incident investigating their own. We are taking the first of those 2 steps on Monday. We are going to announce, and we did tragically have a case that we're looking at as an in-custody death occur about 2 weeks ago here in Montgomery County. That case is now going to be handled by the prosecutor's office in Howard County. And reciprocally, if something happens there where there's an in-custody death that occurs in Howard County, we will take it for them. We think we have a role in rebuilding people's trust and removing the bias. This was the president's blue ribbon panel recommendation. Chief Ramsey, who used to be in D.C., headed that panel.
Great guy.
Yeah, he is.
Philadelphia. This is revolutionary because as we look at, for instance, in that shooting with the buddy, wherever it was, Oklahoma, Texas, whatever it was, the buddy of the chief who should never have been out there and shot.
Carrying the gun, right.
Carrying the gun and shooting it. And then all the cover-up that then came around because it's going to blow back to the chief. It's going to blow back. You're talking about
Well, look,
building trust, which is fantastic.
I think we are one of the first prosecutors' offices in the country, if not the first, to actually adopt the recommendations of the President's panel. We're proud to be there. I can tell you for sure we're the first in Maryland. I think ultimately we need to maybe expand this to regional kinds of groupings where prosecutors from Prince George's County and Anne Arundel County can come to us and have it done outside of their own jurisdiction, so the people in the community that live there can have some faith that there was not a bias or a prejudice that went into the decision making. The same is true of prosecutors, the same is true of police officers. We have a role in rebuilding the people's trust in how the system works. Look, again, we're at the back end of this thing, and again, this is not the be-all and the end-all of what's going to solve the problems that we saw in Baltimore.
It's a step.
It's a step in the right direction. I think it is the model program. We're bringing it here to serve the people of Montgomery County.
How do you deal with the big question that I see is how do you deal with community policing efforts where people know that it's not just the only time they see a police officer or a prosecutor is when they're in front of them in court?
Well, you know, James Comey is the head of the FBI in the United States, and James Comey gave a speech down at Georgetown University about two months ago, and I listened to that speech on C-SPAN, and he said at some point in time about the need for community policing, getting out and knowing your neighbors, and he made a comment. He says, you know, it's hard to hate up close. The lesson there is if the people in the community know their policing officers, they're part of that community, it just changes the entire dynamic.
It's because I know the question, but I spent a lot of time in Central Europe and former Soviet Union in my work, and the change from a militia, serving the state, to public officers, public safety officers. What an interesting transition, and we have public service and public safety. And what's happened in so many communities is the feeling that they're serving the state rather than the community. What you're talking about, getting back to what...
Well, and what that, Don, that is exactly correct. It's a mentality, it's a philosophy that's got to begin at the training academies, because so much of this goes back to how we train our officers before we deploy them to the streets. And what they talk about, are you a military force or are you the guardian? And quite candidly, what we need to do, and I think we have over-militarized police tactics and procedures and training in the United States, and we have to go back to being more of exactly what you just suggested. And I can tell you, look, I've talked to Tom Manger and the various police chiefs in Montgomery County. I will tell you, I think they are heavily invested in retraining and embracing that guardian concept.
John, hasn't your office tried to model the same type of approach in terms of a community relationship? Your attorneys get out quite often, don't they?
We are
short words here.
We are literally in schools every single day here in the county. We run truancy court programs, teen violence programs, internet safety programs.
We could talk all day on this.
Thank you.
John, thank you so much.
Thanks.
This is
It's
great.
great to be here. Thank you.
We'll be right back after these messages. And we are back. José Lius, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
So what's going on? I love Community Clinic Inc. And here you're going to make me change what I call it? You got a big announcement coming up.
We have a big announcement to make. We've been around for 44 years. And after many months of hard work between the leadership at our organization and the board members, we have to retool our mission and our vision statement to reflect the kind of work that we do. We have, as you know, very diverse communities here in Montgomery County. Hundreds of countries represented, hundreds of languages, and with that comes an even bigger number of difficulties. So we have learned a lot. You know, we started as a safety net clinic back in the late 60s, and long gone are the days. We're no longer a safety net clinic. We're a very complex organization that is composed of many disciplines, all integrated towards the wellness of everyone in the community.
So the better you're able to serve the community,
absolutely,
and not having to go for acute care, the more successful you are.
Absolutely. So it's not just about your primary care. We have to help folks understand their circumstances, their chronic issues. So it's education, it's nutrition,
Right.
Is that you talked about the focus of your service that you're providing changing? Is that where the new change or the new direction is?
So we're already doing that, so we needed a name that reflected that.
And while we're right there,
Okay.
people want to learn more about the organization, the excitement about the new name, that you're going to tell us the new name as
Yes.
soon as you've told us the website that people can go to right now.
So our website is cciweb.org, www.cciweb.org, and this is the first time that it's been said outside of the boardroom.
Very good.
So
Send it-
drum
send it-
roll.
Start the press.
Drum roll.
Another- This is great.
So we are
Oh, I've got
now
two
going to be
stories.
known as CCI Health and Wellness Services.
Okay.
Let me ask you, the big question I have for you guys, you do treat a very diverse bunch of people. What if I walk up to you and all I speak is Urdu? You have someone who can,
Absolutely. We have
it's amazing to me that you even find more than two people
one,
that do. But
one of the things that's really important about what we do is that we actually reflect the communities. We represent collectively between 250 people. There's 28 different countries and 23 different languages. So that we can find somebody that will speak one of the most common languages. We also have a language line
Right.
that allow us to provide the services via the phone with a person that speaks the various. We have a lot of dialects.
So you don't have to, I mean, one of the problems about, I think, the school system and with doctors, clinics has been, you have to rely on the child to translate for the parent who may not know the language, and by reaching out with these languages, you don't have that child in the
Which we
strange
don't do
position
because it's not the right way to do it.
at all.
So we rely on our staff first. Most of our staff is bilingual in other languages other than Spanish. And we also have the language line. We also work with a lot of community partners. Right now we have a group of senior volunteers who have been trained to become community translators. And part of their program, they have to provide 20 hours of translation, 20 hours or 10 weeks, depends on
is that the biggest problem you have? Is
communication.
Yeah.
Communication is one of the issues. Transportation is another issue. We are one of our health centers is located next to one of the refugee centers.
How many centers do you have?
So we have 6 medical health centers, 2 dental centers. We have a couple of homeless programs, one right down the street in Goody, and a couple of other satellite offices. So about 17 physical locations with the house all of these different
And your
programs.
funding source?
Everyone. So we apply
get
for
that in
grants.
Yeah, funding source.
We apply
We
for
have-
grants on the federal level, on the state level, the county level, and we also run all kinds of different programs for the
you
state
are
and the
under
county.
the radar for some of this stuff.
And
Now for our patients, we serve about 53,000 people a year.
James, would
I just wanted to know if you're linking in with schools in the Wheaton and Gaithersburg area that have started wellness centers in schools. Are you connected with those?
So our leadership is talking right now with some other folks about wellness centers, school-based wellness centers. It's a difficult thing to do, but we do have a strong relationship with schools that are located near our different health centers, which is where we get a lot of our referrals for our WIC program, which also is the largest in Maryland, and some of our other services.
again, we could talk all day about this. But thank you for being here. Any final thought, just real quick, before we?
So we'll be sending more information out about the new mission and vision, which is
I'll get the press release, right?
and you better print it.
We will.
So more to come.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
It's great work.
James, welcome. This is your first time on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for allowing me to join you.
No, what a great segue, because when we look at our schools, traditionally we looked at it just as a place where kids came in, teachers would arrive before the students, students would learn for 6 hours or so, then the teachers leave, and there might be a sporting event in the evening in high school, but that was it. Schools today are much more than that. They're really community centers. And it's the principals who are leading them up, leading all this effort, and you're the leader of the principals.
Indeed, principals and administrators are asked to do more and more to support students in our communities, and our organization is there to help them and to make sure that they're well informed about what's changing and what's growing and what's going on with our school system. We collaborate with our sister unions, MCEA with the teachers and SEIU with Local 500, to connect with the school system, make sure that schools are getting what they need in terms of resources, in terms of direction, in terms of goal setting. We want to make sure that schools are serving their communities well.
So how did you feel when the governor spent money on prisons instead of education?
It really impacted our budget when we did not get the geographic cost of education index funded by Governor Hogan. It was extremely disappointing to our members, to our students, to our communities, and we're glad that the Maryland delegation, the Montgomery delegation, really led the charge to ensure that that funding will be there for us in future years.
How's it going to affect you, though?
It's going to affect us in terms of losing positions. You know, there's going to be jobs, teaching jobs, administrator jobs, support services jobs that will not be filled next year as a result of this loss of funding.
Now, you had 202 schools, I think, in Montgomery
Indeed.
County. So you had 202.
And more coming each year.
202.
Yeah.
How do you prepare and groom these teachers, I guess formerly teachers, maybe administrators, to take on these vital roles as principals?
As leaders.
As leaders in the community.
Well, we're very fortunate in Montgomery County Public Schools that we have a nationally renowned principal leadership training program, and we have great people leading that and have led it for years. And
Mo
our
Carrasco.
folks, indeed, Mo Carrasco, along with Jeannie Dawson and Loretta Favorette, have worked with elementary, middle, and high school administrators to make sure they know and understand the 6 standards of leadership that come from the ISLIC standards that they need to know to lead schools.
You know, look at Judy Lapping, who tireless for many years after being at Travilla around. But I wanted to ask you about one person, one of the most remarkable educators I ever met, and tirelessly, night after night, with our community in need in our poorest school, Broadacres, Judy Lelick. And it was gratifying. It was so sad when she passed away, because she single-handedly, in 2000, 2001, 2002, and she was talking to Jerry Wee, she was on the point of losing her job because the numbers weren't going well enough. But she persevered, and she had her teachers in there day and night. And for the first time in a long time, what happened? What happened at Broadacre School?
Well, Jody is a remarkable example of what the impact leadership can have on an entire school community.
Right.
And Jody understood and knew very, very well that it was going to take more than just her to communicate, connect with, and build the capacity of that students and the parents in that community. And so she rallied, she galvanized folks together. And my wife had the good fortune of teaching at Kent Mill when Jody was there as an assistant principal. So I know her and her family well, and hats off to Jody's legacy in Montgomery County.
And what is her what's her legacy forever? I mean, this is a great thing for principals.
I think that's a great question. I think Jody's legacy is what happens when we collaborate, what happens when we inspire, what happens when we're willing to take risks.
And we rename a school after her.
And we rename a school after her,
which
absolutely.
was a feather in the hat of principals.
So what happens for the superintendent role?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think it's a question on the minds of many people
Yes, that's the big one.
in
Who's
our
gonna be the
community. And I think the good news is we were able to take a breath, continue with the stability of Mr. Bowers and his leadership. We're very excited that he's going to remain on for another year while we kind of reset the search and get the person that we need to lead us permanently moving forward.
Are you all working with Pat O'Neill on that, and how do you feel
Yes,
about
our organization, like the teachers and the support services folks, we collaborate and meet with the Board of Education on a regular basis. I had an opportunity to meet with Ms. O'Neill today and talk about how we move forward with this search and other items of common interest.
Look, in my office, it works. James and I are on committees together
Indeed.
on MOUs, and we work on truancy programs, safety dating, internet safety. We are in a million different programs, and I will say, going back to Mr. Bowers, it is as he has stepped in this year as the interim, it seems to have been completely seamless. And I mentioned to James how outstanding he did a presentation for the principals at a breakfast I attended just last week, and I thought it was a phenomenal presentation by Mr. Bowers. So we're in good hands.
So why
We're
not
in good
keep him?
hands.
Yeah.
He will be here for another year. He's been with Montgomery County Public Schools for 37 years, so his leadership has stood the test of time. And
Well, the kids even like the school days when he calls them off for snow days. They even like how that's done, which is rare. You never get anybody like
We've got
that.
about 10 seconds
Sure.
left. Final thoughts?
final thoughts very quickly is I like what John's describing in terms of the partnership. We need more partnerships like that in Montgomery County to make sure that we're serving all of our citizens.
Sounds to me like you and Jose Luis are going to be talking a little bit after
Yes.
this.
Absolutely right.
And
Well, look forward to it.
Absolutely.
You got it.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you all for
Thanks,
joining
Don.
me today, and I want to thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Mooers, and I invite you to join us again next week at this very same time.